Is eating meat bad for you and the environment?
Hello, and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. You can't be a meat-eating environmentalist, so claims Greta Thurnberg. Yes, she is trying to persuade everyone to cut out meat from their diets and become vegans. This is on a number of levels, particularly that she claims that by not having as much meat in our diets, this will help climate change. Well, is this true or is it not? And many restaurateurs are jumping on the bandwagon of going vegan. We will talk about it in a lot more detail. But I have a particular view on this, and I'm particularly partial to certain diets. So here's my view. Meet your future. After years only eating things with a root and omitting meat from your feed, you'll accelerate your life as an old fruit and then just quickly go to seed. So, Clergyman Pete, what's your view on the raging vegan sausage roll and the and the idea that you could cut out meat from your diet?
I think there were 2 points as we highlighted in the title. Is it bad for you? Is it bad for the environment? Eating meat, is it bad for you? Now, the arguments for it being bad for you are interesting ones. It's saying that it's bad for you because, it can be fattening. It can, of course, contain diseases. Meat can contain different diseases. And also, it's more difficult to process, I suppose. So that's some of the reasons, anyway, where people will say it's bad for your health. But also bad for the environment. Well, the bad for the environment thing is an interesting one. There are two sides to it. One is, if you would excuse the Anglo-Saxon, farting cows and other such similar animals will produce methane, which, if there's enough of them, that's regarded as contributing to global warming. I'm just, gentle listener, I'm just putting the argument. I'm not saying that I agree with it necessarily. But the other side of it is that we find that they're inefficient. So if you wanted to produce enough calories, enough energy, rich food, enough protein-rich food for you to eat, the most efficient way to do it is not with a cow, because a cow needs to consume a lot of vegetation in order to be converted into its flesh, whereas you could just eat the vegetation. So that's the argument. So is it bad for you? Well, no, I don't actually think that these arguments hold much water, but that's the argument. That it's.
Well, I think holding water is not really the problem. I think it's other things.
Oh yes, perhaps not the right
However,
phrase,
let's give a little bit of fact behind this, because the United Nations Tackling Climate Change Through Livestock report indicated recently that animal agriculture is responsible for a great proportion, that's between 14 to 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions than all transportation. Now, we can claim that perhaps, obviously that's an interesting study, but I think that we have to also say, it's when we look at greenhouse gas emissions, it's not just to do with livestock. In fact, even humans. Humans, sadly, whatever they eat, are going to produce output. We can't avoid that. But I think we also, as we highlighted, is that there are some challenges with reducing meat from your own personal diet. So there are vitamins, vitamin D, and many other qualities that meat does bring. And it's about, surely, a balance. Because if we simply go the route that we're all going to just become vegans, really this could have some serious effects. But interestingly, from a commercial point of view, so I'm going to come from that side, it does seem that a lot of retailers, so going to mention certain companies like Greggs, the British bakeries that have been really quite prolific over the last few years, have had tremendous success with their vegan sausage roll. But here's one which I would say is even bigger. So the US plant-based meat maker Beyond Meat is last year raising money, as it was doing, to build up its market stock value, because basically the Beyond Meat says that it wants to tap into the growing popularity of veganism and hopes to boost research and development and expand manufacturing facilities. Well, that may be the case. And in fact, the company, which is backed by investors, including meat producer Tyson and Microsoft founder Bill Gates, expects to receive millions of dollars from the offerings. So we're actually seeing that this trend isn't actually just an environmental issue, is it, folks? It's a commercial venture. So maybe there's something sort of sitting behind this in terms of what people's real motivations. Is it really the environment? Is it about your own personal health?
Yeah,
or maybe it's about something in your pocket.
Now, this analysis of decision making in terms of who gains the most power, an analysis of the power exchange, is an interesting one. I mean, it's one that's been done frequently by social scientists, certainly since the 60s, and yet it is not really an analysis that is often done on this particular subject, and I think it should be. And maybe there are papers on it. I haven't seen a
I've got more
scientific
statistics.
Okay, well that's it. So I'd be interested to know. Well, the papers I'm talking about. Is there do you have an analysis of on there of how the power the reason for these decisions is gain in power and money?
Well, I think to say what is the reason, what is the motivation,
Yes.
and I'm going
That's what I'm
to
talking
say
about.
that I'm going to make an interpretation that I would say, yes, of course, there are environmentalists who will make such claims, but I come back to this statistic, which might prove my point. So again, on the one side, we're talking about the religious side, and on the other side, we're talking about the business side. From a business perspective, veganism is becoming more popular in Great Britain.
Yeah,
so, for example, research conducted by the Vegan Society estimated that in 2016, there were around 540,000 vegans across the country, compared with around 150,000 the 10 years before, i.e. in 2006. Now, the supermarket chains in the United Kingdom are stocking more vegan options, such as Waitrose and many others, Tesco's and many other firms such as Iceland, and they're all dedicated to this particular function. It is a growing field, and I would say that the reason for this is, dare I say, a fad. And what I mean by that is that there's nothing wrong with plant-based foods. It's good. It tastes nice. I know that's subjective. Maybe Clergyman Pete has a different view. It depends on the particular food option. But what I would say is, coming back to this point about removing meat from your diet, I think that's a mistake on a number of levels. One, I think you need to have it as part of your weekly diet, if not daily, but certainly weekly, because science proves that having meat in your diet is a good thing. And of course, we must also include fish as well. The reason I bring that type of topic up is because when Greta Thunberg did speak, she also mentioned that the fishing, meat and dairy and egg industries aren't just relentlessly cruel to animals, they're also a nightmare for the environment. So in terms of her rhetoric, she's attacking not just the cattle, she's also tackling a number of industries. And I think that that's a mistake, because that there is a danger that this not only is it going to stifle industry, I think what could happen is it could actually distort people's diets. Now, we're not going to go down this route too much, but I want to mention something, which is this, that some worrying statistics, particularly in Scotland, are showing that 2/3 of adults are obese. Yes, again, 2/3 of adults are obese. Yeah. And the reason for that is because their diets are getting an imbalance. That people are starting to look at vegan options, but actually not all vegan options are healthy, particularly when it's wrapped around pastry, buttered sugary pastry, and suddenly finding that everyone's jumping on a bandwagon, not thinking, am I really getting fish and dairy and meat, as well as plant-based products in my diet? And so my worry is this: there is nothing wrong with saving the environment. There is nothing wrong with doing the right thing to cut down carbon emissions. But where I see the problem is that it forces people into extreme measures. And when it comes to things like cutting certain things out of your diet, as well as killing industries, I think that that's not a sustainable way of building an economy, but also the right way to actually, ironically, look at the environment. Fisheries. Here's a good example. Fisheries. We know that the Britain has suffered badly in its fisheries recently because people have cut out fish, a large proportion of fish, partly because of the association with the restrictions on fishing with the EU. That's going to change, folks. Great. But what I would say is that not enough people are putting fish in their diet, as well as other dairy products. And we've seen that the agricultural industry in the United Kingdom has suffered because retailers have been putting their focus and pressure too much in other areas and stifling farmers where they're not getting enough margins on their milk. So we're also having that problem. And I worry when you have somebody who is hijacked as an ambassador like Greta Thunberg, who will say some things that make sense, but sadly a lot of them can be very, very negative, particularly on business.
Yes, now I'm going to come on to the religious angle and onto the sort of personal response angle in a minute. But first, I just wanted to say, gentle listener, please do respond. Please tell Mark that he's talking nonsense and say, Peter, you're the one that's making sense, that sort of thing, as we expect from you.
But
actually,
more
no
like
one said that yet, but I'm sure you will at some point. No, just let us know. I mean, you can comment if you're watching on YouTube. Just put a comment. We'll see that. But you may want to just go to markandpete.com. It'll take you to our podcast webpage, and there's a place to put comments there. Just put them in. That's the way that people tend to get in touch with us. So do write there, and we'll feature your comments on a future show. We'll just edit out all the swear words. But, just moving on quickly, we're looking here, I just want to briefly look at the religious aspect. You see, there's a Christian response to this. A care for the environment is an important part of Christianity. It starts this idea of caring for the environment in Genesis, right at the start of the Bible, with human beings being seen as stewards of God's earth, having to look after it. But it also says something very specific about eating meat. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. Genesis 9 verse 3. God is saying, that the animals are available to eat, and the plants as well.
Thank you. See, my argument has been endorsed by the man above.
but you see, so that was obviously a way of saying that this is being created for you to eat. You shouldn't feel bad about eating any of it, but you should look after it. That's the
yes, correct, absolutely.
So we're not talking about unsustainable farming or anything like that, but we're saying that, yes, meat shall be eaten. And in fact, it goes into more detail later in the Bible. This is from Deuteronomy 14. It says, these animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle. And it lists animals that you can eat and animals that you can't. So that, it wasn't just a free-for-all. There were certain animals that were available to eat, animals that you could farm effectively. So it is something that's part of God's creation according to the Bible. God's created order involves humans eating animals. Now, interestingly, if you look at what I just said, I first quoted Genesis 9 verse 3, but he goes back even earlier. Genesis chapter 1 even talks about the animals and the plants being available to eat. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. That's before the fall, before sin entered the world. So it's not as though you're not allowed to eat them until the fall has happened. But you can eat things. These are available for you to eat even before sin has entered the world. So it's part of the natural creation. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well,
go back to the Bible, look up the references that I've said, see if that isn't true. Gentle listener.
it's interesting. I think that's useful to do, and I would also invite people to think about statistics in a very careful way.
Yes.
Now, I know that environmentalists have come up with this argument that meat eaters are responsible, on average, for the use of 1,500 litres of water a day. The point being is that it seems that more people obviously are eating meat at the moment. So, for example, while it takes only 1,790 litres of water to grow 1 kilogram of wheat, you need to use more than 5 times that amount of water for 1 kilogram of beef. It takes the equivalent of 50 bathtubs full of water to produce just one steak. That's fine if you put it that way, folks, and environmentalists. However, imagine this, I would say. If we literally cut out all of our meat and suddenly we would only then need to have vegan products, our arable land would suddenly have to be increased tenfold, and suddenly the use of water and also the ability to be able to ship all of the goods around to feed everybody because they're not eating meat. So actually it's the balance of economics as well as the balance of the environment. So the argument in my case, ironically, to save the environment is we need a balance. Because if we literally cut out all our meat, suddenly those statistics change dramatically. So yes, it's good to know the 50 bathtubs of water to produce just one steak, but I would suggest that to produce one vegan meal could ironically, if we literally all downed all meat and never touched a bit of flesh again, suddenly I think that we would have a worse environmental disaster by turning that way, because you would need to grow more plants, you'd need to have more sustainable chemicals to grow the food, and we just simply do not have enough land, folks.
Yeah, so let me just take that a bit further, because based on just taking it further from what you just said about the claims about eating meat and saying that these animals, farmed animals, result in desertification, not serving you desserts, Mark, which I know you love, but rather causing deserts to be formed. However, that's it's not as simple as that. If you remove the animals, actually, you may well end up with the harm to the environment being more rather than less, and the reason for that is that animals are part of an ecological system, an ecosystem, as it's sometimes called. Then animals are needed for the plants to thrive, on all different forms of animals. That includes things like cows. Yes, because cow poo is a way of spreading seeds, just to put it bluntly. And you see, it's just very simplistic thinking to use the sort of arguments that you were quoting them as using. It's actually more complex than that. So we have a rich, complex environment created for us, and we're part of it. I'm not saying we should destroy the environment. We should see ourselves as part of it, part of the natural environment, which includes animals. So even in farming, I'm not saying have these massive farms where you rip up all the hedgerows. No, I'm saying have good, locally run farms. Localism, folks, the Mark and Pete mantra. Yes, that's even true as a truism in farming and in keeping in farming meat products as well. So don't vilify meat, and for its environmental impact, but also for eating it. I said I come to the sort of the personal response to it. Getting fat is one of the reasons given for not eating meat. There's arguments about whether, in fact, vegans are fat, but I suppose it depends on the individual. I think the jury's out on that one. But what's been found, science now increasingly points to sugar, not fat, being the culprit for putting on weight, but also things such as diabetes and this sort of thing. So eating red meat with plenty of fat in it is actually good for you. In fact, the most nutrition-rich food is meat, because if you think about it, they're eating lots of plants. They're eating lots of stuff in order to produce their meat. So it's been focused down, it's been concentrated, and you get a lot of nutrients in the fat, so you should eat that as well. So it's not as simple as just looking at the amounts. How rich is the food in nutrients? And meat is very rich in nutrients. So the science just doesn't support that veganism is good for you. You know, some people have health conditions when they have to, that's all they can eat. But I don't think it should be your choice. But interestingly, the reason given, and this is just in conclusion here, a slightly cheeky conclusion to what my contribution here, and that is that I would say that this promotion of veganism, you know, not for, you know, people just prefer it or it's for their personal health reasons, they have a particular condition, fair enough, but this demands by people such as Greta Thunberg that you should, for the good of the environment and for your health, eat meat. You must be vegan. You must do that. It's like a religion, isn't it?
Well,
you must do it. You should do it. And I just, I'm going to hand it back to you now, Mo, but it's interesting that during the time of the Bible, there was a problem with people worshipping idols, as in, little statues, and people would give food to them with little meat offerings, burn some meat. And so in order to avoid doing it, people eating the wrong thing, eating the wrong bit of meat, someone would eat only vegetables. Whereas in the Bible, it said, well, if you're strong, you got strong faith, it doesn't matter what it's been offered to. If it's good food, it's good food. But they end up, this verse is about that. But I think it does speak to this, to the problem today. This is what it says. This is a genuine quote from the Bible. Romans chapter 14, verse 2. I'm reading from a recognized translation, the English Standard Version. It says this: one person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Mic drop. The end of my contribution from the Bible.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned about sort of this concept of religion, and we'll conclude on this thought, which is this idea of veganuary, or many people might describe it in another way, veganuary.
Yes.
And this idea it was originally launched in 2014 as like a non-profit organization encouraging people to try out being a vegan in the first month of the year. And here we are, of course, obviously in January. And this is a pledge, essentially. Now, we know that the figures have certainly risen. And in fact, the recent figures are quite surprising. It says that they've already surpassed 370,000, including 150,000 on top of previous years, and is steadily rising, according to Veganuary's head of marketing. And that's interesting to know. But again, folks, and this is what we want to hear from you, which is, do you think that maybe this campaign has really based on the wrong foundation? Maybe this is actually just a fad. Do you think that maybe actually cutting meat out of your diet is really wrong? And for your children, for your family, this is actually something that could be quite damaging. I certainly know from a business point of view, it's very damaging. But I will also say from an environmental point of view, the odds and the facts do not stack up. But why not log on to markandpete.com and please let us know your thoughts. This is a subject that I think is going to grow. And Clergyman Pete, please pass me that vegan sausage roll, because I know you haven't finished the last one. So as we conclude, please, listeners, join us again for next sumptuous feast of conversations on the next Mark and Pete show. Toodle pip.